And welcome to Sports on Tap, part of the NEO Sports Insiders Network, presented by RRT Productions. We're live from Studio J in Brunswick, Ohio. We have
live.
Josh Jeffy, Sean Duffy, Ed Dick. I'm Rob Troutman.
Hot mic there.
How are those levels?
Normally that's me.
Oh, boy. That
Normally
was
that's me.
Woo. Wow. All right. Yeah, we are live.
Coming in hot.
And coming up on our show here, we're going to recap Week 9. Week 9 of the season, and that's crazy that Week 9's here. The playoffs are somewhat getting into perspective here, and we'll also preview in the week ahead, Week 10, and give our conference MVP spotlight games. We'll go over some of the team rankings, too, for the playoffs so teams know where they stand if they haven't checked already, which I'm sure most of them are probably just checking to see where they're at right now.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised we can access joeitel.com
Yeah.
because I imagine he had to increase his bandwidth at some point in time, especially this time of year when everyone's looking to see who they need to beat, who teams either beneath or above them need to lose to. I mean, he's got 4 different scenarios that play out here to determine where you may or may not fall based on whether you win out. Max average win out, min average win out. Same thing with losing out. And it's crazy, man. If you're a math nerd like myself, this is a fantastic time of year. And,
if you're a numbers guy.
I'm pumped.
Nerd
I love this.
alert.
Yep.
If you're a numbers guy like Ed, you love this time.
It's okay. Nerds can be jocks, too.
That's right.
Sure.
They sure can. All right. On that note,
All state, son.
let's Josh Jeffy, Week 9 in the Greater Cleveland Conference
GCC.
was pretty fun to watch,
Yeah, right.
listen to.
It's fun every week, Rob.
It is.
And this week is no different. We'll start first. Menor against Brunswick. Menor with a 20-10 victory over the Blue Devils. Menor improves to 7-2 overall, 5-1 in the GCC. Brunswick, after a hot start, is now 3-6 on the season, 3-3 in the GCC. Brunswick had the running game going though. Quarterback Nick Horton and fullback Alex Gillespie combined for 43 carries, 204 yards, and a touchdown.
Wow.
But it just wasn't enough. Menor quarterback Tadas Tatarunas was 20-29. With passing 252 yards, 1 TD, and Menor running back Alex Matthews, again with a workmanlike performance, 27 attempts, 117 yards. This loss probably puts Brunswick's playoff hopes to an end. They have 1 game remaining against Strongsville, who is struggling right now. So Brunswick might be on the outside looking in. Menor continues to be one of the top teams in the GCC with a 5-1 conference record. So that was, a big game for Brunswick. They needed that. They played Menor tough. Brunswick actually moved the ball pretty well on Menor, just didn't have enough in the end to have the victory. Then we move on south. Euclid had a 35-27 victory over the Medina Battling Bees. Euclid remains on pace on top of the GCC with a 7-2 overall record, 5-1 in the conference. Medina drops 2-4 in the conference, 4-5 overall. Euclid was up 22-0 at the start of the second quarter, and Medina did a good job. They lived up to their nickname, the Battling Bees. They battled to get it down to a 1-point lead for Euclid at halftime. Euclid, though, on the ground as a team, 309 total yards. Chris Collin had 88 yards of those on 16 carries with 1 touchdown. Medina running back Jimmy Dodd, 19 carries, 79 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also added 6 receptions for 72 yards. This was a sloppy game, though, if you're a coach. In total for both teams, 21 penalties for 184 yards of penalties in the game. This game was almost 3 hours long, actually 2 hours and 50 minutes. But Euclid prevailed on top, again 35-27, remaining tied for the lead in the GCC. This game was Saturday. Solon remains on top of the GCC with a 25-0 victory over Shaker. Shaker is now 0-6 in the GCC. That's 6 straight losses that they have. Solon improves to 7-2 overall, 5-1 in the GCC. They have the big win over Menor, which puts them right now in first place of the GCC. So
three-way tie up there.
Yeah,
Wow.
three-way tie if you're looking at victories and all that stuff as how they had it at Cleveland.com. They had Solon ranked number 1 in the GCC. So I figured because they beat Menor and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But yes, they're
all three of those teams beat each other.
right. There's three-way ties up there. So we'll talk about the rankings, the playoff rankings a little later because we did have some movement in the GCC as far as that goes. But back to the Solon Shaker game. Solon, Johnny Mooney, MVP-like performance that he had, 178 yards, 2 touchdowns passing, 38 yards rushing, and 1 TD. Again, didn't play very much in this game because Solon had the game pretty much in check. Solon wide receiver Jake McCurry, 6 receptions, 99 yards, and a touchdown. And for Shaker, who led the way, Marcus Carthon, 13 carries, 69 yards to lead the Red Raiders on their offensive end. But yet again, they did not score. Tough 6 games here in the stretch for Shaker in the GCC. But like anything, you never know. They can come back next year and play well. So my spotlight game, I picked a good one. It was actually Elyria with a 24-21 overtime victory over Strongsville. Strongsville, that is their 4th straight loss in the GCC. Our boy, Strongsville running back Zach, really just pretty much led the way for Strongsville. 45 rushing attempts, but for only 152 yards and no scores. That's just over a 3-yard per carry average. Chris Atkinson, this is the matchup I was looking for. This is why I made it my spotlight game because he had 2 big running backs for each team. Elyria running back Chris Atkinson is an MVP candidate. 26 rushing attempts, 187 yards, 2 touchdowns. In total, both teams, total offense, 504 yards rushing between the 2 teams, only 86 yards of passing combined for the 2 teams. So this was definitely a running game per se.
So that was probably the quickest of all the games.
Yeah, right.
As opposed to the 3-hour marathon.
And you know,
it was done at 8 o'clock. It started at 7. This is crazy.
Halftime at 7:30.
We have to give credit to the kicker, Josh Lewis for Elyria, 31-yard game-winning field goal in overtime to lead the Pioneers over the Mustangs. Again, Strongsville with its 4th straight loss, pretty much out of playoff contention right now, but they still have a glimmer of hope. So, all in all, it's kind of separated themselves. 3 tops teams, Euclid, Menor, and Solon, are all on pace. They're all on top. Like Ed said, they all kind of beat each other. It all comes back to the rankings, where it is in the playoff rankings. According to Joe Itel, again, a little foreshadowing, little tease. We'll talk about it. There is some movement between the top of the GCC when it comes to the rankings. So we will talk about that a little bit later.
And sometimes losses with teams that might be ahead of some of the teams that are trying to get in could help some teams out, but you usually don't want to rely on that to happen, especially when it comes to the playoffs.
No, absolutely not. The playoffs is all about getting wins, and you really do control your own destiny, really, with the season. And you win 9-10 games more often than not. That's going to get you in. It just so happens in this region, where it's 16 teams get in. I mean, you're going to see some 4 and 5. You're probably going to see some 5 and 5 teams in the playoffs this year, just due to how the region is spread out here.
I mean, was anyone surprised that Solon right now is atop in the GCC? Ahead of maybe a Menor, or I mean, I would.
Well, it's all about
Euclid as well.
Like Ed said, those 3 teams kind of beat each other. But I would think Euclid had the more impressive win. Solon had the more impressive win against Menor. They kind of handled it was a good game, but they kind of handled Menor in that aspect. So, I mean, it's interesting to see how it goes. But Euclid's also had a very good year. It was kind of a surprise. I mean, they were a decent team last year, but Coach Rotsky, I believe, he's really got that team fired up.
Yeah, and that's what you get with Coach Rotsky too. I mean, he takes these programs, especially on the east side. He gets them up to speed pretty quickly, and he doesn't mess around. I mean, he's made the playoffs with Maple Heights, with Cleveland Heights, and he's made the playoffs with Euclid now. They're just competing for playoff seeding and hopefully trying to clinch themselves a home game if they haven't done so already. Between Solon, Menor, and Euclid, I mean, Menor's always a solid program. Coach Trevisano's guys playing pretty tough, and the thing I noticed about those guys is their team are filled with underclassmen.
Yeah,
a lot of guys making plays that were sophomores, juniors. So they definitely have a lot of talent in the pipeline, and a lot of it's playing varsity right now. Euclid, we already talked about them. Solon gave us our worst loss of the year. I mean, they whooped us up pretty. They whooped us up pretty good, and that I don't know if that's really indicative of how the score was. I know things just kind of got away from us in that game, but they've proven to be every bit as impressive as they were against us.
And I think I was maybe a little surprised just because Solon the last few years had some average years. They weren't really at the top like they have been in the past, but I feel like this is almost a year that they've proved that they're back. I mean, very impressive wins, especially in that Brunswick win where they just dominate from start to finish, and beating a very good Menor team who's been at the top for a long time and still obviously at the top, but that win might prevail for them in this season and win conference.
Yeah, and you look. There's a nice separation here. I mean, I'm not gonna say a nice separation. There is a separation. I mean, you have these East Side teams that have kind of overtaken the teams that we're used to playing. Medina, Solon, Brunswick, even Elyria. I'll throw them in there because they've been involved in our conference for quite a while, and there's just a clear separation of who is the elite and who is trying to get there. And the guys, Brunswick hasn't found a way to figure it out yet. The last time that they had a chance, the last time they beat Solon, we beat Solon last year pretty efficiently, but we still lost to Menor.
Yeah.
So there's until one of those teams like a Brunswick Medina, Strongsville can break through against the Euclids, the Solons, and the Menors every year, and not just pick one of them off. You need to be at least 2 out of the 3. Things are going to be, that's where the separation of power is right now.
All right, well, we go from the GCC to the Southwestern Conference for Week 9 here as we head to North Ridgeville. Lakewood trying to win its first game of the season at North Ridgeville. And
Rob, just tell me, did the Rangers win this game?
Well, you'll have to wait.
Okay.
You'll have to wait and see.
I was very concerned.
Lakewood was stopped North Ridgeville on its first drive, and the Rangers then drove the ball down to the home team's 24-yard line. It was set up by a 15-yard pass play from quarterback Jack Wheatrey of the Lakewood Rangers to Michael Goolsby, and that drive stalled as Lakewood had a nice drive going. Then North Ridgeville's defense steps up, and running back Cameron Bright took the handoff from quarterback Colin Solinger, made it through the line and cut left 65 yards for a score. It made it 7-0 in the first quarter. Then on third down and short, running back Cameron Bright again ran it in from 2 yards out. It was 14-0. Bright then again, he had a day, scoring again. It was 21-0 on a 35-yard touchdown run, this before half. But it ended up being where Lakewood did manage to get on the board right before halftime as quarterback Jack Wheatrey found Michael Goolsby on a 21-yard scoring strike. There was 1 minute and 5 seconds left before half, but it ended up 21-7 North Ridgeville at half. And the final score in this game was North Ridgeville 35, Lakewood 21. North Ridgeville improves to 7-2. Lakewood 0-8 on the year. Jack Wheatrey, the quarterback for Lakewood, went 20 of 40 for 231 yards, 3 touchdowns and an interception. And Michael Goolsby, 7 catches for 82 yards and a score for Lakewood. North Ridgeville running back, he's a junior, Cameron Bright stepped in for DeMario McCall, who did not play again. Ran for 255 yards and 3 touchdowns, and is an MVP candidate for me as, again, Ridgeville wins 35-21. Then we head to Avon Lake, where Midview, undefeated, goes into Avon Lake, and they pretty much dominated for the most part. It was Midview scoring first as Damian Mahone caught a 15-yard pass from Dustin Crum. That made it 7-0. Then Midview comes back. Logan Bolin with a 2-yard pass from Dustin Crum again. That was the end of the first quarter. It was 14-0. Then Avon Lake comes back and scores as Alexander Bishop had a 20-yard interception return. It was 14-7 at that point. Then Midview back-to-back touchdowns by Logan Bolin, one of 26 yards from Dustin Crum and one of 43. At half, it was 28-7 Midview, and Midview rolls 35-14. They now are 9-0 on the season. Avon Lake falls to 3-6. Dustin Crum had 236 yards passing, 4 touchdowns. He also had 121 yards rushing on the day. And wide receiver Logan Bolin, who quarterback for a while this year for Dustin Crum, he had 9 receptions, 141 yards, and 4 touchdowns. For Avon Lake, it was Holden Ohm, 19 rushes, 82 yards, and a touchdown. Now we head to Olmsted Falls, and this was a tough battle between North Olmsted and Olmsted Falls. And North Olmsted struck first as Ryan Coleman got the Eagles off to an early lead when he stripped the ball out of the hands of an Olmsted Falls running back, raced down the sideline 23 yards for a touchdown. It was North Olmsted 7-0 at that point. Then, again, North Olmsted comes back. Coleman caught a 10-yard pass on a slant route from Christian Ammons with 10 seconds left in the first half to extend the Eagles' lead to 17-10. And at 17-13, North Olmsted, Spencer Linville, he had a nice gain to the Eagles' 12, but it was before Ryan Coleman again stripped the ball away. The Eagles recovered it, and that led to a Max Becker 31-yard field goal. It was 20-13 Eagles. We head to the fourth quarter, where later in the fourth, Coleman caught a 67-yard pass from Ammons again, which set up Becker's 20-yard field goal to increase the lead to 23-13, and that was the final score. North Olmsted a winner in Olmsted Falls, 23-13. North Olmsted improves to 5-4 on the year. Olmsted Falls, there's a comma after Falls. They fall to 6-3. And for North Olmsted, Josh Hofstetler, 35 rushes, 132 yards. Quarterback Christian Ammons was 10 of 21 for 154 yards and 1 touchdown and a pick. And for Olmsted Falls, it was Spencer Linville. He rushed for 112 yards and a touchdown on the day.
Hey, is Joshua Hofstadler related to Leonard Hofstadler from Big Bang Theory?
That's something you might have to ask him. I don't think there would be too many Hofstadlers, you wouldn't think.
Well, also Leonard Hofstadter on Big Bang Theory is a fictional character.
It's irrelevant. That's irrelevant. Well, clearly it's a fictional character if he's if he got married to the blonde that he's married to in that show.
I mean, I get that. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Well, if he'd like to call in or be a part of the show and let us know and answer your question,
Shed some light.
Let us know how.
Shed some light on that.
Let us know.
Let us know how his sister-in-law Penny is doing. Be fantastic.
Exactly. We head to Amherst, where Amherst still is looking for a win this year as they take on Westlake. And Westlake gambled early in the game. It was 4th down on its own 30-yard line, and the move would pay off as they began to establish a run with Jaquan Hardy's dominance. As on a short run, Hardy would get in the end zone on a 1-yard touchdown run. Then they faced a 4th down inside the red zone, and the Comets gambled actually on this. It was 7-0 Westlake at this time, but Amherst had the ball. They gambled. They were denied by the Demons. They turned the ball over, and the next play, Jaquan Hardy took off down the sideline for 92 yards and a touchdown as Westlake extended their lead to 14-0. Then before half, it was junior quarterback Trey Bialois as he led the team down the field and scored on a 2-yard pass it was Bialois to Sam Russo, and it was 21-0 at half. And they would win their second game of the season in dominating fashion, 37-0. Westlake with the win in Amherst, and Westlake improves to 2-7. Amherst 0-9 on the year, and Westlake's Jaquan Hardy, the running back who has had a great year, 23 carries, 221 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Trey Bialois, I believe this was his first start possibly of the season. Don't quote me on that. 8 of 16, 96 yards passing, 8 rushes for 123 yards as they, I think, look to switch it up a little bit and get him involved. He's a junior quarterback, and it helped out as Westlake, again, with their second win of the season, 37-0 over Amherst. Now, my spotlight game, Avon traveled to Berea Mid-Park, and I thought this was going to be one of those games that probably would be high scoring because Berea Mid-Park's offense can put up some points along with Avon, but Avon's Will Heilman had a 21-yard pass from Jake Sopko first. It was 7-0 Avon. Avon wasn't done as Austin Lewis recovered a fumble in the end zone. It was Avon 14-0 early before Berea Midpark would strike back as Sean Epps had a 30-yard pass from Nick Gassman. That's 14-7 at that point. Then Avon scored 21 unanswered as Garrett Choate had a 1-yard run that made it 21-8 after the first quarter. Then Carter Rudy with a 1-yard run. And Heilman, again, 22-yard pass from Sopko. Before Berea Midpark would strike, it was Nick Gassman on a 3-yard run. And Garrett Choate then scored for Avon. It was 42-15 at halftime. Avon with the lead. Avon would score 3 more times, and they win big, 63-15. Avon victorious. Total offense, Avon 475 yards to Berea Midpark's 278. Jake Sopko threw for 3 touchdown passes. Will Heilman, again, a impressive day, 9 catches, 156 yards. And again, Avon 63, Berea Midpark 15. Avon 8-1 on the season. Berea Midpark falls to 6-3, and they still, I believe, are just on the edge in the playoffs. We'll go over all that, but I was a little bit surprised. 63-15. I mean, Berea Midpark couldn't muster anything up against a good Avon defense.
And that's a tough beat for them because they were at home. That was their last home game. And that was senior night. I mean, that's got to be really, really tough for Berea Midpark. And now with that loss, it kind of puts, like you said, puts them on the edge of being out of the playoffs. They really got to come back this week and take care of business. And now, like we mentioned off the top of the show, they're watching scoreboards at this point.
Yeah.
To keep themselves either in or maybe get a better seating. They don't control their own destiny. I mean, that's the best thing we can really do, for any coach. They like the idea of controlling their own destiny as opposed to watching scoreboards. And unfortunately, Berea Midpark with that loss, I mean that now next week's game against Westlake on the road is going to be all that much more important and a lot more pressure going into it.
Yeah, I think Avon's offense was impressive, but Berea Midpark can never muster anything in this game, and now they definitely need to win in Week 10, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Berea Midpark. I think they still have a good shot to just squeeze in, but it'll be pretty close. Now let's head over to the Suburban Conference.
Yes, sir.
The American Division with Sean Duffy.
Yes, sir. Well, we're going to start out with Warrensville Heights traveling to Aurora. Aurora had 8 different players score a touchdown for them as they rolled to a 55-13 victory over Warrensville Heights. Gavin Blunt started the scoring with an 88-yard kickoff return for a touchdown, and Aurora never really looked back in this game. Our MVP from last week, Bubba Arslanian, had another pretty decent game. He scored a defensive touchdown. And the most important thing is, as we're looking at the playoff picture, Aurora, this win pretty much clinches them a home field advantage in the playoffs, or a home game in the playoffs. But it also, barring a catastrophic loss, pretty much secures number 1 in the region for them, which is pretty big going into Week 10. So Aurora took care of business from a playoff standpoint, and again, senior night at home, you want to take care of that as well. Moving on to Kent Roosevelt, traveling to Copley, and this was a shootout for most of the game, and then Copley kind of took over towards the end of the game here. Our perennial MVP candidate, Weston Bridges, 20 carries, 307 yards, 5 touchdowns.
Jesus.
William Bridges,
God,
not to be outdone, goes 12 carries, 123 yards, and 1 touchdown to help secure the win, 56-35 over Kent Roosevelt.
I love the Bridges of Summit County.
I know,
Seriously.
right? Yeah, Bridges of Summit County. I was just trying to come up with a name. That's a fantastic one. Thank you for that,
Got
Ed.
it.
Trademark
Boom.
that. Yahtzee
Boom.
goes to dynamite. Not to be outdone, Christian Melman had himself a game from Kent Roosevelt, 34 out of 56, 441 yards passing, 5 touchdowns.
We're having a Copley's defense today.
Nice
4
job.
of those touchdowns went to Calvin Blackman, who finished the day with 201 yards receiving and 4 of those touchdowns. So in a losing effort, that's a pretty spectacular stat line for Christian Mellon, who's been doing this all year. Unfortunately, their defense is not really, keeping them in games or losing tough ones, and this was another case of it. So very, very entertaining game for Kent Roosevelt and Copley. Next, we have Talmadge heading to Revere. Talmadge ended up winning this 35-19. Craig Dilworth rushing for 111 yards and a touchdown. Talmadge had rushing touchdowns from 5 people. I mentioned Dilworth, but also Ty Shannon, Richie Erie, Ned Spragling all scored rushing touchdowns. Both teams really have been eliminated at this point from the playoff contention, but nice to see that they're still putting up those points. They're still going to the, obviously there's a lot of pride on the line here, so we're going to see that, but definitely a pretty good game. Offensively, a great output from Talmadge's running game and really something to, hang their hat on. My spotlight game was Barberton traveling to Highland. And as we talked last week, we mentioned Highland really had to win the next 2 games in order to maintain their spot in the playoff picture. And not to be outdone, Highland started this game out very, very well against Barberton. They got out to a big lead early with an outstanding effort by their backup running back, Manny Della Serna. He had 25 carries, 123 yards, and 2 touchdowns. What's great about that is that he's, again, starting in place of their injured starting running back. But the big story on this is the Highlands defense. For the second straight week, they put an outstanding effort together. I want to shout out the Highland defensive line who held Brandon McCall, who again is one of my MVP mainstays. He's at this point he's a 1,500-yard rusher, but the defensive line of Highland is made up of Tyler Frederick, Joey D'Amico, Zach Phillips, Jacob Scavuzzo, I butchered that, and Kyle Duali. These guys basically made it their mission that Brandon McCall wasn't going to beat them. So they did. They held him to roughly about 75 yards for the total game on 20 carries. I mean, this guy was averaging like 225 a game. Now, still staying on the defensive side of the ball, Highlands backup cornerback Jake Mall had a breakout game. This guy had 2 pass breakups on 4th down. One of them near the end zone, stopping Barberton's drive into the end zone. He also got a 2-yard tackle for loss, was instrumental once Barberton realized that the running game was stifling, that they were going to go to the air, and Barberton really made it a point to go at Mall because he was the backup coming in. But he was textbook. He was very, very good on coverage. He had an interception. Unfortunately, that was negated by a penalty. He was instrumental on special teams where he had a big tackle on the opening kickoff, which put Barberton in a hole early. And then he recovered an onside kick attempt when Barberton was able to kind of score a couple touchdowns late in the game and started to try to make a run. So Jacob Mall, and the whole defense really of Highland for 2 straight weeks has, played really, really well. And, they've really established themselves. And, as we mentioned last week, this was one of the games they had to win. I mean, they had to go in and they had to, they had to make sure that they kept themselves in the playoff picture. So, again, the one thing you also want to look at with this win, it gives them an opportunity to play this coming week for a share of the Suburban League American division. I mean, they share that title with probably Aurora or Copley, depending upon who wins those games. But, this is pretty big for Highland, who, had a really good season. They got upended, but they're now they're in the playoff hunt for sure. And we're really looking forward to seeing, like we mentioned in the GCC and in the Southwestern Conference, there's really about 2 or 3 teams in each division that we're seeing that are kind of separating themselves from the rest of the division, and we're now talking about their playoff picture because there are going to be some very, very interesting storylines going into week 1 of the playoffs and even next week into week 10. So that was a pretty good overall week for Highland and Barberton. They tried to come on late in the game, but unfortunately just wasn't enough. Overall, we see, a pretty good week in the American division, and, let's see what happened in the national division. Ed?
All right, well, it was the same story, different week for Nordonia Knights' Anthony Perrine as he ripped off 4 more rushing touchdowns, leading the Knights to a 49-21 victory over the host Twinsburg Tigers. Perrine scored from 3 runs of 4 yards apiece, and he also hit a 42-yard run for a touchdown. Devin Soltis scored on a 46-yard touchdown reception and a 43-yard punt return for a touchdown. Jalen Tucker for the Tigers, he completed 10 of 19 passing for 120 yards and a touchdown for Twinsburg. With the win, Nordonia is now 6-3 overall, 4-2 in the conference. Right now, they're sitting in 8th place in Division II, Region 3, and they have a matchup coming up against Wadsworth. Twinsburg remains winless and will travel to another winless team, Cuyahoga Falls. Oops, spoiler alert. North Royalton picked up their 3rd win of the season,
Nice.
shutting out Cuyahoga Falls 37-0 at Serpentini
Wow.
Field. Quarterback Christian Robinson threw 3 touchdown passes, including an 81-yard touchdown pass to Dylan Roska to cap off a 28-point first quarter. Jack Milkos caught 2 touchdowns of 36 and 43 yards. Cuyahoga Falls, unfortunately, suffers their 4th straight shutout and their 5th shutout overall. With the win, North Royalton improves to 3-6 overall, 2-4 in the conference. The Bears will finish the regular season against Stowe, while Cuyahoga Falls will host Twinsburg, with both teams searching for their first win. Let's go to Hudson, where the Explorers pretty much took it to visiting Wadsworth from the get-go, chalking up a 30-6 victory over the Grizzlies. Roman Moreno rushed for 2 touchdowns and caught a touchdown from Jackson Parker. Hudson really got going on the ground there. They were able to rush for over 230 yards. And defensively, they did a great job holding Dan Weinerman and Alex Jones to less than 100 yards combined. Those two have proven to be a very formidable combo of running back for Wadsworth over the course of the season, and Hudson did a really good job of shutting them down. Hudson's defense also got 6 sacks on Wadsworth quarterback Connor Montgomery, good for a 47-yard loss total. With the win, Hudson improves to 7-2 overall, 5-1 in the conference. They are currently sitting 6th in Division II, Region 3, and they will host Brecksville next week. Wadsworth is 3-6 overall, 3-3 in the conference. They will finish their season at Nordonia. Our spotlight game for the Suburban League National Division. Brecksville, Broadview Heights, and Stowe, they put on an offensive display in this highly anticipated National Division contest. The Bees, missing starting quarterback Luke Sternad and starting wide receiver Tyler Tupa for the rest of the season, got plenty of production from Dan Sharilla and Sam Wigloos. Stowe quarterback Kyle Van Treese and running back Jason Gobble were up to the task, though, leading the Bulldogs to a 37-28 win. Van Treese started the scoring, tossing a 56-yard touchdown pass to wide receiver Joe Andrassi in the first quarter. Bees running back Josh Underwood countered with a 76-yard touchdown run, evening the score at 7. Andrassi struck again with a 34-yard touchdown reception. Gobble followed with a 23-yard touchdown run, and a 35-yard field goal from Burnham gave Stowe a 24-7 lead at the half. Starting out the third quarter, Dan Sharilla finds Sam Wigloos from 36 yards out to cut the Stowe lead to 24-14. Stowe's other kicker, Rigby, connects on a 32-yard field goal to extend the lead back to 27-14. Brecksville gets it back to within one possession. Wigloos scores again on a 76-yard touchdown pass from Dan Sharilla to start the fourth quarter. Rigby connects on a 38-yard field goal, restoring a 9-point lead. Josh Underwood scores his second touchdown for the Bees, a 1-yard touchdown run to bring the Bees within 30-28. However, Stowe closed the scoring with a 41-yard touchdown run by Kyle Van Treese, accounting for the final 37-28 margin. Guys, the stats in this game would fill up a fantasy scoreboard something fierce.
I bet, yeah.
For the Bees, Dan Sharilla was 19 of 31 passing for 295 yards and 2 touchdowns. MVP candidate. Sam Wigloos, receiver, hauled in 7 passes for 224 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Good Lord.
Also an MVP candidate. I mean, not to be undone, Josh Underwood, 126 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, all for the Brecksville, which makes what Stowe did a little bit more impressive. Stowe's Kyle Van Treese completed 15 of 30 passes for 283 yards, 2 touchdowns, and also that 41-yard back-breaking touchdown at the end of the game. Jason Gobble, our normal mainstay on the MVP board, 104 yards rushing and a touchdown. Joe Andrassi caught 9 passes for 195 yards and 2 touchdowns. MVP candidate. Stowe remains undefeated. They are number 3 in Division I, Region 1. Brecksville drops to 7-2 overall, 4-2 in the division, and right now they are on the outside looking in at 11th place in Division II, Region 3. Stowe will tune up for the postseason, taking on North Royalton, while the Bees have a big one coming up. They have an outside shot of the playoffs if they can beat Hudson. So both teams are 7-2.
No easy feat there.
Major game, major computer points on the line in that game right there. So lots of very impressive spotlight game as far as Stowe and Brecksville Broadview Heights is concerned. Brecksville Broadview Heights showing no signs of slowing down, even though they lost their starting quarterback and their starting wide receiver for the year. Sternad has a knee injury, and Tupa broke his collarbone.
Oh, my.
And, obviously, two major losses.
Yeah.
Offensively, they were still able to put it together. Defensively, I mean, it's not very easy to stop Stowe. Not many teams have done a good job of slowing them down this year.
Yeah, I think that's what impressed me the most is Brecksville loses two of its starters, and, they competed till the end with Stowe. I mean, they lose by 9 points, and we're in the game, put up some impressive numbers. Stowe, has pretty much rolled over teams for the most part this year. But Brecksville, each week it seems like they're still competing, fighting, and, they're still in it, but, they're on the outside. They needed that. That would have been a huge win for them. A ton of points at hand there, but we'll have to see what happens. And then, we go to the American division with Sean, and, Kent Roosevelt, I was impressed with putting up points against Copley. I mean, their offensive production was pretty
surprised
impressive.
about that.
When I was following that game, and kudos to the Kent Roosevelt, they really were on Twitter talking about that game on Friday night. What impressed me most was, the score may not reflect that, but I think it was a lot of back and forth. And I think Kent Roosevelt, given their season, given what's been going on with them, has, could have easily just said, Copley, they only lost that one game, but they've been rolling people over. And, yeah, they put up a lot of points, but, Kent Roosevelt came to play, and they weren't just going to lie down and let Copley roll over. And they came to play. And, kudos to Christian Melman and Kelvin Blackman for finding – the ability to score points on a pretty impressive Copley offense. I mean, I think 35 points is up there with their highest point total they've given up all year. So, I mean, Copley's defense is nothing to shake a stick at. It's not like the Baylor defense, and for those who follow college football. Copley was putting up points and stopping people from putting up points,
Yeah, they've been dominated.
And that was very impressive of what Kent Roosevelt did. But I also hang my hat to Highland. Barberton's been scoring points as well. And Brandon McCall has been just a monster, and again, it all came down to defense. And I think you're going to start seeing, especially now that we're getting towards the end of the year and the playoff picture is becoming clearer, we're going to see those teams that have really, really good defense really start to become very, very formidable to those teams that can put up points. Because, in a shootout, it's very, very easy to just trade it's anything like a prize fight. Trading jabs is fine, but if you got a knockout punch, and I think a good defensive line or a good set of linebackers can really be your haymaker. Because, for a team that's used to getting their way on offense, for a team to come in and play a team that's, just punches them in the mouth, that's definitely a difficult thing for any team who's used to having that success have to deal with. So that was pretty impressive with what Highland's been doing over the past couple weeks. They're starting to kind of find themselves on defense, and obviously with teams like Aurora and even Copley, those are really the top three teams in the American division. I mean, the only ones with really any shot of making the playoffs. Barberton, Revere, Talmadge, Kent Roosevelt, they're all mathematically eliminated according to Joe Itel. But Aurora, I mean, they're currently number one in the division in Region 3. Copley sits at 4 in Division 2, Region 3. Highland's at 6 in Division 2, Region 4. But I think if they win this week, they may climb a little bit. I don't think Copley's going to get any higher than 4th. I think they're really just trying to maybe secure a home playoff game, with a win. And again, they're not playing the top tier competition. I mean, I think those other teams may come into play, but Copley, I think they're going to be playing for that home playoff game. Whereas I think Highland maybe just trying to get. They'd like to get a home playoff game, surely, to break in that new stadium. What better way to do that, than with a home playoff game? But I don't. From where they sit in their computer points, I just don't think they're going to get into that number 4 slot to get a. They may jump up 1 to 5, which will give them a more favorable matchup. I think they'd be playing. I'm not sure, but we'll get into that in a couple segments. But that's definitely one of the things I saw. And again, even with Stowe, I mean, Stowe's really the class of the Suburban League. I mean, I don't think anybody wants to play Stowe at this point, even in the playoff picture.
And Stowe's done it all year, and they've this is their second. They're starting to put together a really nice program down there in Monroe Falls and Stowe. Right now, they're sitting number 3. They've clinched a playoff spot. For all intents and purposes, they're probably going to clinch a playoff home game. And then, someone's going to have to travel down to Stowe and see what happens down there. And you got a bevy of good competition, though. I mean, in Division I, Region 1, it's cream of the crop down there. So, we'll get into that as we progress here through the standings. But Stowe, Hudson are the 2 major teams that have done really well in the Suburban League National Division, with a close second going to both Macedonia, Nordonia, and Brecksville Broadview Heights.
Yeah, I mean the tough thing with Brecksville is that they have to play both Stowe and Hudson in league play. You know what I mean? And kind of like we were talking about, I think we were talking about Brunswick earlier, about how, like, in order to really make noise in that division or even in that region, you got to beat both Euclid and Menor, to do it. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's almost like Brecksville, if they had a really great season, but to beat both Stowe and Hudson is a tall order for any team, because those are just 2 perennial powers.
Yeah, absolutely. Nordonia is right behind them too. I mean, their 2 losses are Nordonia and Stowe, and unfortunately, their wins are against all the teams. The teams that have the highest amount of wins out of their beaten opponents is Brunswick at 3-6, North Royalton at 3-6, and Wadsworth at 3-6. They have wins over 2 winless teams.
Had they split the Nordonia and Stowe game, had they won one of those games, it probably would have helped their cause a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And if they could beat Hudson, I mean, Hudson can help them out. I'm just not sure they're going to get to the playoffs with a win over Hudson.
All right. Good breakdown right there, the Suburban League. Nice job, guys.
Thank you.
All right, now we're going to get into our MVPs, our conference MVPs, presented by Z's Cream and Bean. Sports on Tap now gives its conference MVPs, presented by Z's Cream and Bean, located at 2706 Boston Road in Hinckley, Ohio. All right. Our conference MVPs. Let's first head to the Greater Cleveland Conference and Joshua Jeffy.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. It was a little difficult trying to find a really standout performance. I mean, you had pretty much business-like performances done by most of the teams. So on games that you get late in the season like this, coming down, not as high scoring, closer games, because a lot of times you have teams fighting for final playoff positions, so they're going to play really well. So this is where you maybe start to lean towards defensive players as maybe MVPs. But in this case, I did not. I actually went with the Elyria running back Chris Atkinson, who had 26 rushing attempts, 187 yards, 2 touchdowns to help lead the Elyria Pioneers to a 24-21 overtime victory over Strongsville, keeping their playoff hopes on life support. Right now, we'll talk about it in the rankings, but according to Joe Itel, Elyria is 15th, so they are right at the cusp. Every game for them does count, so this was a huge game for them, and I knew coming into this game it was going to be a battle of the running backs between him and Zach.
Con.
Thank you, fellas. And he led this is a game, I mentioned it earlier, 504 yards of rushing between the 2 teams. He had 187 for Elyria, so he's my workhorse MVP of Week 9.
Nice. Great MVP from the Greater Cleveland Conference there. Mm-hmm. Now we'll head to the Southwestern Conference, and it was tough. I had Jaquan Hardy put up huge numbers and got their second win. But I went with junior running back Cameron Bright of North Ridgeville, who ran for 255 yards and 3 touchdowns. In the win over Lakewood, it was 35-21. North Ridgeville wins, go to 7-2, and that was without, again, Demario McCall, who, still has hamstring issues and has been injured most of the year, really. But other players have stepped up, and Cameron Bright, I mean, what a game, 255 and 3 touchdowns. He's my Southwestern Conference MVP. Now let's head to the Suburban League American Division and Sean Duffy.
Yeah, I ran into the same problem I think you and Josh did, is there was a lot of really good performances in the American Division. Obviously, we're going to start out. My candidates were Weston Bridges, had 20 carries, 307 yards for Copley, and 5 touchdowns. Christian Melman, quarterback for the Kent Roosevelt, went 34 of 56, 441 yards, and 5 touchdowns. All 4 of those touchdowns being thrown to Kelvin Blackman, who finished the day with 201 yards receiving. Again, 4 touchdowns. Backup running back Manny Della Serna had 25 carries, 123 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And also Highland cornerback Jake Mall had a monster defensive effort, really kind of spearheaded that defense. Again, for a second week in a row. I'm going to give it to Christian Melman. Obviously, when you throw 441 yards and 5 touchdowns in a losing effort, that to me, that's a pretty good performance. So for Christian Melman, congratulations. That's an awesome stat and
huge.
Really,
huge
that
game.
Guy's been doing it all year. You know what I mean? He's 2 or 3 times been in the candidates. I mean, it would have been easy to give it to Weston Bridges. I think he's had it twice already this year. We're going to give it to Kent Roosevelt's Christian Melman. For the national MVP, we go to everyone's favorite, Ed Dick.
Well, we're going to stick with the MVP candidates all come from the same game, and rightfully so. We went over the stats earlier. Dan Sharilla, quarterback for the Bees, wide receiver Sam Wigloos, wide receiver for Stowe, Joe Andracey. However, the quarterback for Stowe, Kyle Van Treese, completes 15 of 30 passes for 283 yards, 2 touchdowns, along with a 41-yard touchdown run to put the game out of reach for Stowe against Bruxville Broadview Heights. Stowe's Kyle Van Treese is the Suburban League National Division MVP for
Good
Week
choice.
9.
Good choice. I like that choice. Not that you care.
Thank you,
but-
sir. I appreciate,
Not that
I
you
appreciate
care.
that.
Not that you care, but that's
good
I mean,
that-
Hey, he even said you're everyone's favorite
He is.
today.
Yeah,
Everyone loves Ed.
That's right.
you know what it is.
Ed's good peeps. Not just because
Right.
he's my cohort in covering the Suburban League.
Correct.
Yeah, that wouldn't do it.
No.
But right now we're going to step away. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to give you Week 9 recaps of the Buckeye Bucks and Massillon Tigers. We'll look ahead to Week 10 games coming up and give our team rankings. All coming up. We're Sports on Tap, part of the NEO Sports Insiders Network, presented by RRT Productions.
For the best coverage of Cavs, Indians, and Browns, check out neosportsinsiders.com. neosportsinsiders.com brings you breaking news, opinions, and video from all things related to your favorite Cleveland sports teams. Like us on Facebook and follow at NEO Sports Insiders on Twitter for live updates from all the games. neosportsinsiders.com, bringing you the best in Northeast Ohio sports coverage.
Join Sports on Tap the first Thursday of every month at Z's Cream and Bean, 2706 Boston Road in Hinckley, Ohio, as Sports on Tap talks local Ohio high school sports, Cleveland sports, and national sports topics. It's all happening at Z's Cream and Bean the first Thursday of every month starting at 7:30 p.m. Join us. You're listening to Sports on Tap's Ohio High School football coverage live on Mixlr. Live streaming every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Remember to check us out on Twitter at SOT Podcast and use the hashtag SOTHSF to post score, stats, and pictures from all your high school football games. Like us on Facebook and listen to all of our archive shows on iTunes, YouTube, and Podomatic. Again, our coverage starts every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. We're Sports on Tap. Sports on Tap now